Hi, welcome to another video. I actually haven't recorded much this year at all, as you may have seen in my last video, and I thought that after last video I had pretty much just reorganized my whole library and catalogued everything, home library I guess you could say, and catalogued everything, and I said that I wanted to do a video about it because it's really exciting and I feel like it has reinvigorated the way that I want to be reading and organizing what I'm reading, buying what I want on my bookshelf this year. And I know that it's March and I feel like, I don't know, I'm one of those people that really likes New Year's resolutions and I really like doing things at the beginning of the year, and it feels really strange to be doing this in March, but I thought I needed some sort of cataloging system or some sort of, I don't know, book system, I guess you could say. And why not do it now? Why wait? I should probably actually introduce myself if you're new here. My name is Michaela. I'm a PhD student at the University of Tübingen, but I'm originally from New Zealand, as you can maybe tell by my accent. I moved to Germany in December of 2021 and started my PhD in January of 2022. My YouTube channel is basically just my life here in Germany. My husband and I travel a fair amount and I document my PhD journey and our life here in Germany, and of course books, which as you can see behind me, I have a lot of books. This isn't everything. There's a couple of shelves above where the camera goes and a couple of shelves down, and then in our actual office, which is another room where we have our desks and everything, is some more bookshelves with all my academic books. So I've kind of separated it between my university books and my fiction books, and I haven't yet catalogued my academic books, but I have catalogued my fiction books, and I thought that's what we can go through today. And then from here I'm basically going to catalogue my non-fiction books in the exact same way. So yes, welcome to the video. I hope that you enjoy this. And in terms of digital apps and everything that I used to track all my books through Goodreads, and now I still update it on Goodreads because that's what most of my friends have access to and we follow each other and everything on Goodreads, but I pretty much only put up my rating of books on there. I don't go through like the full logging process and everything on there anymore, just because the interface I feel like is really old and I don't really like it. And I think last year or the year before I made a video on how I'd moved over to the Storygraph, and while I still have a place in my heart for the Storygraph, I found it was too much to do, too many apps, and considering that all of my friends are on Goodreads and I didn't know anyone on Storygraph, when I switched to a third app, Storygraph was the one, unfortunately, to go. There are still aspects of the Storygraph that I miss, but I feel like for the benefits of Fable, which is what I have moved to, they kind of outweigh the stuff that I miss from the Storygraph. I did move to Fable just because of the whole system behind it. The fact that when you rate books, you can, like the Storygraph, do it by 0.5, so you don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can do like a 3.75 stars or a 4.25, which is a big thing for me when rating books. I feel like that's like, even when I was marking exams in university for students, I really struggled to fit it into a specific guideline. I feel like I like to be able to put it into as small a decimal as possible, just so that I can differentiate between different books, because to me, there's a big difference between a 4-star book and a 3.75 star book, just in terms of if I would recommend it to somebody else, if I enjoyed it. I feel like as soon as it's a 4-star book, I would consider rereading that book. In fact, I'm most likely, anything between a 4 and a 5, I'm most likely to reread and buy for my bookshelf. Anything below a 4, I may have enjoyed, but I'm not going to reread the book. And so it's stuff like that that I feel like is really important when reviewing books. And then the fact that Fable also has reading communities, so you can join a group who's reading the same book as you, and you don't have like a chat system or anything, but each chapter you can leave comments. And so when you read that chapter, you can read through how other people reacted to that same chapter, or maybe they noticed something that you didn't notice, or you say something and then somebody else responds to that. And I found the communal side of reading in these community apps really good. Whereas at least when I was looking into it on the story graph, you had to be friends with the people and then you have like your own little book club and you read it with them. That might have changed, but at least when I was looking into it, that's what it was. And so Fable, when I moved over, kind of sold me on that. So yeah, I've really enjoyed Fable so far. Come find me if you're on Fable. I don't really follow that many people, but I think that's mostly because I've been doing it myself and I don't realistically know that many people who read very much. So anyway, that's kind of on the app front of what I'm tracking. In terms of my consumption of books, I'm still pretty much doing the same as I have been for the last like year and a half. I used to primarily, well, pretty much only read physical books back in New Zealand. I really struggled with audiobooks for some reason. I just couldn't concentrate. And I realized after moving to Germany that it was the type of books I was trying to listen to through audiobooks that just didn't work for me for an audiobook. They were really dense books generally, or classics. I find really hard to remember the information. But books like fantasy books where there's a lot of world building, there's a lot of detail, often a slower plot, I find it easier to listen to them because it's more descriptive and so there's more going into your brain so you can actually imagine it. I still have physical books, as you can see, but like I said in my last video, I'm switching the order in which I buy books. I know a lot of people who love going to the bookstore and browsing through and reading the blurbs and then buying a book that they go home and read. Whereas because we're traveling so much, in the sense of we've moved our life up from New Zealand and come to Germany, and then in 2 years when I finish my PhD, we are going to be moving, whether it's to another city in Germany, whether it's to the UK, America, we don't know. And so I don't really want to be upping and moving with a whole bunch of books that I don't love. I also feel like, I mean, I could sell the books, but then that's going to be money spent on books that I didn't thoroughly enjoy. And I think as well, like I was saying in my last video, I really like looking at my bookshelf and seeing books that I've read and feeling like there are certain memories attached to that book, even if I've only listened to it as an audiobook or read it on my Kindle. And so I've been buying the books afterwards if I thoroughly enjoyed it. And generally that's if it's like a 4-star book or above, unless it's a series that I've already started, in which case, if it's a series that I've already started that I'm enjoying, I'm pretty certain that I'm going to keep enjoying that series, and so I will buy the book. And one of those examples is Wheel of Time, which I've now read the first 3 books. I'm currently listening to the 4th book because I don't have it, so I'm just going to go through and buy the whole series, especially because the print edition that I started buying is now out of print, and so I have to buy everything secondhand and kind of have to keep an eye out for when copies from that print edition come out so that I can access it and find it. And so yeah, I've kind of just been keeping an eye out for that, and if it just so happens that I manage to get all 14 books soon, then that's better than not. I also have this really weird goal that I've had since I began my PhD, that I really want to finish the Wheel of Time series before I finish my PhD or around the same time, because I started the first book on the plane to Germany, and so it kind of just feels like it's tied to the PhD experience. And I know that there's 14 books, but it's not so much the books that's an issue in the sense of reading, because I read quite a lot in the evenings. Like I said, I listen to audiobooks, which I do while cleaning and everything. But the problem at the moment is actually accessing the books, because there's such a long wait list on the library app that sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to get the next book. So the other day I actually went through and requested everything in the series, and if one of them comes earlier than what I'm up to, so I'm currently reading the 4th book, if like the 7th book becomes available, you can delay your access of it, but you still stay at the top of the list. So I'll just have to wait in the meantime. But yeah, that's one big thing that I've changed recently, is only buying the books if I absolutely loved it and if I know that I'm going to reread it. Because I also feel like, what's the point in having the book physical if you're not going to reread it? I don't know. All of this is to say that I've been buying books, not that many realistically, but I have been buying books, and I decided that I do have books in New Zealand and I have books in Germany, and I really want to keep a nice catalogue of what books I have, especially the editions that I have, because if I happen to be out somewhere and I see like the second book in a series, I want to know what the print edition is to see if it's going to be the same, because it's really stupid, but I really hate when a publisher makes their first sold copy a new print edition to what the previous books are, and then they all end up being different heights. I'd rather try and get them all in the same print edition so that they're at least looking smooth on my bookshelf, especially with, like, I don't know if you can see this, but the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, they've got a design on this side, and so if they were different heights, which is what the new print run is, they wouldn't line up with the designs, and I find that really irritating. And so this print series that came out with Onyx Storm is part of the old print series, but Fourth Wing and Iron Flame that you can now buy in the bookstores is a different print run, but Onyx Storm, even though it came out 2 months ago, isn't in the same print run, and so I would have had different size, but anyway, it's just very annoying. So I wanted to catalogue this, and then also I have books in New Zealand that when we go back to New Zealand in a few months, I'm going to catalogue everything so that I don't accidentally forget what books I have, and then I go through and like buy it again or something, or I forget what I've got in New Zealand and end up buying a copy here in Germany. I don't know, it's a whole thing. And I saw a couple of videos of YouTubers who had bought like a scanning device that's connected to its own program, and you can go through and scan your library and everything, and it uploads it to a program. I don't have one of those. I also feel like for how small my library is, there's not really any point getting one of those, and I also don't want to have a completely separate program on my computer. So I basically went with Notion, because I use Notion for my whole life. I've set up my PhD on there from the beginning of my PhD. I have all of my like home tasks on there. I have gym programs on there for when I'm not going through a program that my husband wrote. And so I thought it would be really handy to have my library catalogued on a program that I'm already using all the time, and that's Notion. I also have given my husband access to this because there's a few times during like birthdays or Christmas where somebody's approached him asking him what books I read, what books I have, or what books I have coming up that I want to read and or buy, and he has no idea. And he has previously gone through my Goodreads, which, like I said, is not entirely up to date. It's up to date with what I read, but not books that I want to read or want to buy. And so it doesn't entirely help him. And so I have given him access to this whole thing so that he can see exactly what I'm talking about. And maybe it will be of use to him. Maybe I'll get gifted some more books. But anyway, I will take you through it. I did find this template on Notion. Somebody had already set it up, and I just personalized it to myself. And so it is a little bit different than, I'll put the link down the bottom in the description box of the template that I ended up selecting, but know that it looks a bit different to what I have now set it up as. So this is my Notion template. It has up the top my library, and the first thing that you'll see are books that I am currently reading, as well as books that I have read this year, which arguably I don't need to have on here because I am tracking it on Fable, but I thought if I'm already putting in the effort to log it on here when I'm in the process of reading, or if I've, for example, pre-ordered a book, rather than delete the line, I thought it's kind of nice to have a running tally of what I have been reading. And also, for some reason, the person set it up with a timeline, which I don't often use, but it is kind of cool to see books that I have read and how much overlap there is, or how long it took me to read them. It's not like the most important thing in the world, but it has been kind of cool to look through. And like I said, it means I just don't have to go through and delete it. So I will go through and delete them, or maybe I'll like duplicate this page when it goes into the following year. But at least for 2025, it's nice to have it all laid out here. I am also somebody who has multiple books on the go because I read generally depending on my mood, and sometimes I really like a really dense book, but then if I've had a really long day at university because I'm reading academia all day and I come home and my brain hurts, I don't really want to be reading a super dense book. I'd rather have something that's a little bit easier to read, and so that's why I have multiple books on the go. I also generally have a book on the go on each format because it just makes it more practical. Like, I like reading physical books, but if I'm walking to university, I don't want to be reading a physical book while I'm walking down the street. And so in that case, I'll listen to an audiobook. And then if I'm traveling, I find it really hard to travel with books because the covers get ruined or it just takes up extra weight in your luggage, and we travel quite light. And so then I want to travel with books on my Kindle, or I don't have an actual Kindle, I just have it on my phone or on my tablet. In which case I need to be reading ebooks. And then also sometimes I get caught somewhere, like a GP appointment, for example. The amount of times that my GPs have been running late by like 45 minutes, and I can't sit there listening to my audiobook because I need to hear them call out my name when they're ready for me. And so then I will read something on my ebook. And so I generally have multiple books going. Right now, actually, I'm in a little bit of limbo because I did just finish an ebook because I was reading physical books in preparation for a book that I pre-ordered, which was supposed to come out today. And I turned up to the bookshop today and they said that they only received half of the pre-orders in the mail. And so I am gonna have to come back sometime later in the week and hopefully pick it up. And so I'd finished my last physical book on Sunday, which meant I had 1 day layover, which is now 2 days layover. And so I had an ebook that I hadn't yet finished, and I ended up finishing it yesterday. And so now I just got my audiobook and I'm kind of sitting in limbo. So it's fine. I like my audiobook at the moment. And so I'm just listening to my audiobook when I would normally be reading in the evening. There is a section on the side for current read. And as you can see, there is nothing in the physical. I'll change that to an ebook when I also have an ebook that's like forefront of what I'm reading. I also am somebody who picks up and puts down books because sometimes, like when I started the Wheel of Time series, it was very, very dense and I was just starting my PhD. And so I needed time to get through it. It wasn't like I was going to do a full day at university and then come home and read Wheel of Time because it was just super intense. And so there were phases where I picked it up and read for a couple of days and then I'd put it down and read something a bit lighter. And so because of that, it's nice to have everything tracked here so I can see what's paused, what's not. Like you can see here under status, I've got a book that's pre-ordered. I've got a book that's ready to start on my Kindle. I've got 2 books that are paused. The reason The Shadows Rising is paused is because I did start it as an audiobook, you can see here. And then The House of Earth and Blood became available on my library app, and I have a shorter time window to listen to that than I do the Shadow Rising audiobook. And so I thought that I would skip that for a second, put it on pause, and go to the book that I have less time on the loan. So I do like going back and forth sometimes depending on my mood, and it's just really nice to be able to track everything here. If it's an audiobook, I just do it out of percentage. I know it says pages up the top, but I just do it out of 100%, and then instead of having a page count, I have it on percentage that I've listened to. And then if it's like a Kindle, obviously there's tons of page numbers. And so I just keep it in there as it is. And then the cool thing about this is that you can put the month that you finished it, and that's what uploads onto the timeline tab. There is also quick tabs on the side that I haven't actually linked up yet, but I will be doing that shortly. I just haven't got around to it yet. I've got my 3 reading goals for the year, and then it's the rating system. Unfortunately, the way that the person who set up this template did it is without the 0.5s or the 0.25s. And so, like I said, this isn't the most accurate tracking that I'm doing. I'm doing everything on Fable, but it is kind of nice to see how many fit into each category. Directly under this came with the template is a section for quotes, and I do really like this. I think it's really nice to, when I'm flicking through, see some quotes from books that I've read that I've really enjoyed. And then even as I'm reading through, like I generally underline and I tab the books that I'm reading but sometimes you don't remember the quotes, especially if they're really, really significant quotes. And so I really like having this here so I can remember the things that I read. I then have a section which is coming up next, and so it's books that I have ready on my Kindle, on one of the apps that I have to listen, so whether it's Everend or whether it's the library app Libby that I use. I have everything on here that is ready or that I'm hoping to read next, so that, I don't know, sometimes I finish a book and I'm in like an existential crisis of like, what is life? And I'm so engaged in the world that I come out of it, and then the following day I'm like, wait, what was I reading again? Not that I've forgotten the last thing, but what was it that I was wanting to read next? Because you're so stuck in the world that you've just read about. It's kind of hard to move on. And so I like looking on here and being like, oh, I have like a Sarah J. Maas book that I could be reading, or I've got a historical fiction book, or a classic, or a light fantasy book. What's it called when it's not like heavy fantasy? Anyway, I like being able to have options that I can go to and just like pick. I also find it really hard. I've got such a long TBR list on the apps, whether it's Goodreads or whether it's Fable. And sometimes it's a bit overwhelming looking through that and being like, oh, what do I want to read next? Sometimes it can be really cool because it kind of feels like roulette, trying to figure out what you want to read next. But sometimes I just want a list that I can just turn to and easily start, especially if it's books that I've already got, like on my Kindle or on the library app. And then the pride and joy, which did not come with this template, I set this up myself, is my physical bookshelf. And this is something that I spent a whole evening setting up, and I am so happy with it. It's basically got the name of the book, the author, the series that it's in, whether it's like a standalone book, in which case I haven't put a number in the series, or if it's part of a series. A lot of the time I don't actually own the second book. I only own the first book, and especially if I didn't love it, I'm probably not going to buy the second book, but it's still nice to know what number in the series it is. And it's also nice to go through like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, for example. When I was going through this, I know that I don't have the third book, but I keep forgetting what it's called. And so it was really cool to have it on here, know what the ISBN is and everything, and then I can go through and put it into the want to buy section, because I remember that I don't have it. Or just knowing what the ISBN is, so that if I go to a bookshop, I can quickly go on here and be like, okay, this is the print copy that I have. Look in the bookshop and see, is it in the same print run or not? And then it's got the genre, which of course is very helpful, because sometimes when I want to reread something, or if I want to sort it on here and be like, what do I have that's currently unread, which is another part of this table, I can go through and sort it by genre and then find something that is unread. And then I've got location. Obviously at the moment everything is Germany, because I've only just set this up and we haven't gone back to New Zealand yet. And so when I go back to New Zealand, I will fill in everything that's on my bookshelf at home in my parents' house and figure out what it is that I have at home. And whether that means that I get a digital version of the copy or whether I bring some of those copies back with me, I don't know. It's going to just be nice to see everything that I have. And then of course, because it's a table, it's set up with a function to be able to have count. And so, for example, I didn't know that sitting on this bookshelf behind me is 93 books. 93 books, which is absolutely insane. I did not know that since moving to Germany, including bringing books back from New Zealand, but the majority of these books were bought in Germany. And so it just, yeah, it makes me really happy to know that I'm on my way to a library. Obviously, a home library, I think, is 1,000 books. And so I'm not there yet, but I'm a 10th of the way there, which feels like an achievement. And then after this, I have the want to buy section, which is arguably going to be the most useful section, as well as something that I'm really happy that Luke now has access to. And it also means that when I want to buy something, like I know I want to be on the lookout for this kind of book, I have the ISBN in there, so that if I happen to see it on one of the secondhand online bookstores, I can just sort it by ISBN, because especially with like the Wheel of Time series, there's been so many print runs of this book, but some of them I think are absolutely hideous. but also I'm trying to get it all in the series that I've already started buying because there is an image on the spine, and so I don't want it to suddenly change. And so I've gone through and found the ISBN for all of the books that I want to be getting in the series, and then it means that I'll just keep a lookout for it. There's also, while I was looking for the ISBN, I managed to find some copies on like antiquariate bookstores online, but also on the Amazon. They have a section for secondhand resales, and we're in Germany, so we can look at that version, but we're also about to make a trip to the US. And the US, obviously, because of population density, there's so many more books going around in the US versus in Germany. And so sometimes it's much cheaper. Like, for example, the 13th book in the series, I think was going to be like 20 or 25 euros, but there's a copy in the States for $7. And so it makes more sense to get it in the States and bring it back than to buy it in Germany for like 2.5 times the price or whatever. So it's just nice to have that on the lookout. And then there's also books on my like wish list. For example, I've just listened to the graphic audio version of ACOTAR, which, mind blown, I stayed away from ACOTAR for the longest time because I was always told that I would absolutely hate it, that it's basically just like fantasy trash. And then I listened to a few people who actually talked about the storyline and realized that I'm probably just a basic person because it sounded really appealing. And then I listened to it and I absolutely loved it. And so I've decided to go against those like high level literature readers recommendations because they might not like it, and that's totally fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I absolutely loved it, and it's a series that I am going to be rereading like 100%. I just love fantasy, and while I do appreciate a really like high intense fantasy like Wheel of Time or like the Brandon Sanderson books, I also just really love fantasy books like this. And so it's on my wish list of, if I ever happen to find a cheap secondhand copy, or for example, if Luke wants to buy me a birthday present and he doesn't know what to get me, he can look on here and see that it's on my list. And I haven't got it listed there at the moment, but I'm going to be going through and finding like potential websites that list it, because not every website has it. Some of them have lots in stock, like Amazon, it's almost guaranteed to be able to get a secondhand copy on there. World of Books, not so much. And so it just depends on the book, and I'll go through and list that. And then also there's the Harry Potter books, which I've always wanted to own my own versions of the Harry Potter books. I had some of them growing up, but obviously that's part of my family's collection, so I'm not going to take them, even though I think I'm the one that reads them the most. My brother has kids, and I assume that they're going to want to read them at some point, so they might as well have their copies. Anyway, I went through and bought my own copies for Christmas a few years ago, and I've now got them here on my shelf. And then I've been slowly collecting the side versions, or like the side books, such as Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and then I got a secondhand copy of The Tales of Beedle the Bard. And then within that series of like offshoots is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and Quidditch Through the Ages, which I think are just like small little books, but it's something that I'd love to have on my bookshelf. And then there's The Rule of Wolves, which is a series that I haven't yet started, but I've read everything else in, which is all here. So I've read everything else in the Grishaverse. I just haven't read King of Stars yet, which is the first book to The Rule of Wolves, which is the second book. But I know that I want it. And so it's the kind of thing that I'm keeping an eye out, because sometimes it comes up for like €2, but you've just got to snap it up when it comes up on the website. And at the moment it's I think like €10, and I'm pretty sure you can buy it brand new for $11. So I feel like saving $1, potentially paying for shipping, isn't really the route that I want to be going. So yeah, that is basically everything on my cataloged thing at the moment. That's basically everything on my Notion page at the moment. I'm absolutely loving it. I do have to say, whenever I set up something like this, I get addicted to it for a few days, and I just kind of have to, like, I don't know, update it every 2 seconds. It's like when I got my Garmin watch and you have the associated app, and every 2 minutes you're like updating the amount of water that you've drunk and the amount of steps that you take, and then after a little bit of time you just kind of get out of the routine. I'm currently in the phase of updating this every like 2 seconds, and so I'm trying to just enjoy it while it is, and then soon it'll just become something functional. But it's just nice that I found something that's really, really working for me, and I feel like it's making me really excited to be reading and actually tracking everything that I'm reading, so it doesn't feel like it's just, I don't know, reading and then going into the ether, but I can read something and see what I've read so far this year, see the quotes from books that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and see what's coming up next, see what I own, and yeah, I'm just really enjoying it. So that is everything that is on my Notion page. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that maybe you liked seeing the way that I catalogued everything and seeing a little bit into what's actually in my bookshelf. And yeah, I'm really excited for reading this year. I feel like it's not just reading for the sake of reading or for like leisurely reading, but I'm actually turning it into something that I'm like a hobby, if that makes sense. I'd love to get into bookbinding at some point, but it's a little bit out of my price range setting up everything, especially because I haven't yet found a good alternative to decorating the covers besides owning a Cricut or a Cricut, whatever it's called. And I'm not yet at the phase where I'm willing to invest in a Cricut. I don't have the money for that, and I don't know any good alternatives for decorating front covers without using a Cricut. So at the moment, I'm settling for just reading books and enjoying the books. And eventually, I'd love to get into bookbinding, but it's just not where I'm at right now. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. I know it was kind of just a random ramble about books, but I do love a good book. And I do love my little bookshelf and coming out and looking at it and just, yeah, being thoroughly happy and satisfied with it. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you with another video very soon.